So it looks like we're at time, everyone, so we could probably go ahead and get started. So of course, hello. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. This is one that I'm super excited about. We've got a lot of people here today, so it's going to be a good one for sure. Our webinar today is going to be Google Workspace as an enterprise solution. Why now is the right time to make a move? So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce myself, my fearless co-leaders here today. So my name is Austin Leone. I'm the Manager of Change Management here at Wursta, and I will be moderating today's discussion. I'm here with Joel Tavares of AudioEyes and George Kelly of Archway Communities, and they're going to be joining our fireside chat today. So of course, this meeting is being recorded, and all registrants will also receive a link to view it later this week. We do ask that during today's session that you stay on mute because, again, there is a nice amount of people joining us here today. You can submit questions anytime using the Meet chat in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. It kind of looks like a little text message box. That's where you can go to type in any questions that you have. And then we're also going to be using the polls feature throughout the session. We have a few questions for you guys. So you can access those polls using the shapes. It's kind of like a little triangle, square, circle icon. And then there's also going to be a link in the chat here to connect with our team on LinkedIn. So look forward to that in just a second. I think Emily's going to get that posted. All right, so a little bit about us. This event is being hosted by Wursta. Our mission is to help organizations maximize their use of the cloud. So we work side by side to help our clients make good technology decisions and grow their businesses in ways that they wouldn't have the ability to do otherwise. This helps organizations develop cultures of continuous innovation powered by real-time collaboration. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Joel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and AudioEyes?
Sure. Joel Tavares. I'm the Director of IT for AudioEyes, which is a digital accessibility platform.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much. And then, George, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about Archway Communities?
Certainly. George Kelly, I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Archway Communities. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer and property manager in Colorado.
Perfect. Great. Well, I'm so excited for you guys to be joining us. George and Joel, tell us a little bit about each of your roles, how you started working with Google products, and what that history looks like.
Sure. I think I started using Google product back in 2012, 2013 as part of a overall deployment. And at that time, I was managing the infrastructure for an organization, and that was kind of my first true experience with kind of cloud technologies. Previously, the organization was very on-prem, and so it was my introduction platform to cloud technologies, and kind of spearheaded cloud ever since.
Perfect, great. And George, how about you? What is your history working with Google products?
Yeah, likewise. I've been using the product since 2011, so it's 10 years or so now, and I've been responsible for migrating multiple enterprises, from various other products to Google over the course of those 10 years or so.
Perfect, great. So I'd love to kind of pivot for just a second and get to know the audience a little bit better. Can you tell us out there in the audience about your Google product history? So you'll see a little poll that's been launched in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you'll click on that and just give a quick answer, we can get kind of a pulse on where everyone's at out there. Okay, perfect. All right, it seems like for everyone who's answered so far, maybe there's at least a little bit of usage that's gone on in the past, so that's good to know going forward in our session today. So George and Joel, you both transitioned to Google Workspace in August of 2021. What inspired you and your organization to make the transition? And we can start with George.
Yeah, so this, my most recent migration to Google was the first time that it was actually a request from the employees of the company. It was a ground up initiative as opposed to decision made at a senior level and pushed down. Really, I guess was birthed by the fact that most of the employees of our organization are at this point very used to using the Google products in personal use and in educational use. So it's a natural good fit for an organization like that.
Perfect. Yeah. And how about you, Joel? Sorry. What inspired you and your organization to make the transition?
It's kind of the same thing as what George had stated, right? I started with AudioEye a few months ago, and one of the first things on day one was that people wanted to move over to Google, and so I took that as that's kind of the first major project for the organization and for myself to go ahead and just start transitioning folks over to Google. Both from an employee standpoint and also from the executive management team wanted to move over to Google as well.
Great. What were some challenges that you might have faced beforehand in this transition? And Joel, we can just go ahead and start with you again.
Sure. I think some of the challenges were that we faced were just a lot of integrations and tie-ins to our legacy system, if you will, and having to kind of dive deep into some of those things was a bit of a challenge, especially given that I had started with the organization and it was less than a month in, and we were already starting to migrate over to Google. So that was a bit of a challenge there. And then I think as always it's going to be on a little bit on change management is sometimes a challenge as well.
Absolutely understandable. Yeah, those are two things that we hear a lot really heading into a migration like this. And how about you, George? Did you guys face any challenge, either prior making this decision or really leading up to the migration?
Yeah, I mean, it's really that change management piece that Joel was saying. It's for us, as I said, it was very much a grassroots type of effort within the organization. So much of the younger team, was familiar with Google, but some of the old folks that have been around for a while, have had a long career, have been using other products for most of their career. So it's a little bit challenging to get them trained on how to use the Google products, but certainly not an insurmountable task. It was quite successful, but that was probably the biggest challenge.
Absolutely. All right. And then sometimes it helps just to get a little bit more context about what the organization is like. So can you tell us what your current organization was like, maybe in day-to-day activities, really just before making the move over to Google Workspace?
Sure. I'll remember that one. Okay. Yeah. So we were using the Microsoft product set, most of the product set, and weren't experiencing any particular issues per se, but the improvement in collaboration moving to Google was evident within a week of the transition being completed. The improvement was dramatic, and I guess if anything, the big thing that changed for us in moving from the Microsoft platform to Google was file sharing and collaboration, which certainly there's capabilities within the former product set to do that. They're just not as intuitive and easy to use as the Google platform. So I think that was the biggest change for us.
Got it. Absolutely. And Joel, how about you? What was your organization like prior to moving to Google Workspace?
Yeah, I think it was exactly the same as George had described it, right? We were on the Microsoft platform and heavily using a lot of their products and services. And then, we've had challenges with, file sharing, right? And collaboration was a big component of that. And, being a SaaS organization, a SaaS company, collaboration is very much key, especially in today's world where everybody's working remote. That is, of the utmost importance to keep the teams aligned and continuing to work on our mission. So that was, that was the biggest hurdle that we had to go through, and we're able to, resolve that and increase some innovation, right, in that sense by moving over to Google.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that Wursta was there to help with that process. Now, you both mentioned that the switch to Google came from employees at your organization and was kind of in motion a little bit before each of you joined. So I'd like to kind of hear from the audience again. Have employees at your organization asked or shared any type of desire to work with Google products, just so we can kind of get a feel for where you're at right now? So Emily has again posted that poll. It's going to be in the lower right-hand corner. You can just click right on that pop-up notification, and it's going to take you directly over to that poll. And if you have any trouble, click on that little triangle, square, circle, and you'll be able to access it from there as well. All right, so getting back to our chat, I know that both of you have helped to transition several organizations through this process over to Google Workspace. So can you tell us a little bit about why you keep choosing Google, and have you ever thought about using anything else? And we'll start with Joel, since you're unmuted right now.
Sure. You know, why I keep going to Google is it's right. Part of it is the ease of use, right, and accessibility to the actual platform itself, and it's also, you know, Google's consistent improvements to you know, to its tools and its services. They seem to be consistently innovating, you know, their products and improving on them, and that's you know, that to me is very key in choosing a software platform. You don't want to kind of stay stagnant. You want to continue to grow, especially as your organization continues to grow. So that's one of the key reasons why I keep going back to Google.
Great. And George, how about you?
Yeah, I answer actually the second question first. In that, do I, you know, evaluate or consider other products? And the answer is yes, every time. You know, I make sure to, you know, see what's out there and what's the latest in the competitive platforms. And in the last 5 instances, Google was the one I selected for a variety of reasons. But it's been the front runner each time.
Perfect. Great. So kind of switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about your partnership with Wursta. So for those on the call who aren't familiar, Wursta is a Google Premier partner who companies like AudioEyes and Archway Communities can partner with to help really just lead a successful migration. So I'm curious, Joel, we'll start with you. Why Wursta, and how are you introduced to us?
Sure. So I've actually was introduced to Matt Wursta back in, I believe it's 2013. So I met him, and you know, he helped us out with especially with my first migration. So he was part of that, and kind of stayed in touch with him, you know, ever since. And you know, I saw that you know, he created his you know, his company and his organization, and brought a great team of technical and change management folks onto his team. And you know, I've ran a couple deployments with him in the past, and it's always been a fantastic experience. That's kind of why I you know, I stuck with Wursta and the team.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, we love working with you, so I'm glad you keep coming back. And how about you, George? How did you get introduced to Wursta, and really just why Wursta?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is almost identical to Joel's. You know, I started, as I mentioned, transition into Google products back in 2011, and my first implementation, Matt was part of that team. You know, he's been involved in others along the way, and when he founded his own firm and launched it, you know, was more than happy to give him my business, and I haven't regretted that decision yet.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Thanks, George. All right, so we know that the Wursta technical team provides a lot of guidance on how to prepare for the transition, and really just throughout the entire transition. So thinking back either to this last transition or to any of the ones that you've had in the past, what might be something that you've learned during the planning and migration process? And this time, let's start with George.
Yeah, I think one of the things I did differently this time is I requested, you know, kind of a white glove treatment, a block of hours to do one-on-ones with some of the employees that I knew would be, you know, most challenged with moving to a new platform. You know, that has proven to be a great decision that was very necessary and very much appreciated by the folks who took advantage of it. So I think that was probably the biggest thing that I did in this implementation that I haven't done in the past.
Perfect. Joel, how about you? What's one thing that you learned maybe during the planning and migration process, either on this project or a previous one?
I think on this last project, the one thing that I did learn about was a lot of the kind of technical debt, I guess you could say, within the organization, right? Trying to understand what we had in place and what needed to be migrated over. And luckily enough, the technical team, in our implementation was well versed in a lot of the technology that we were already using and knew where to look and really helped out with a lot of those things. And there's a lot of things even post migration that they let me know that I previously wasn't even thinking about, just to make sure that we had kind of all of our ducks in a row and that the migration even post everybody going live, all of our data was still intact and properly moved over to Google. So there was that component, and then again with change management, even in other implementations, or even not implementing, but moving to an organization that maybe already had Google and getting that change management, that was a key differentiator with between just moving over to Google by yourself, right? You doing it yourself versus working with a partner and then providing that value add, especially around change management, because that's really key.
Great, that's so good to hear. Yeah, I know personally I'm extremely proud of our team and all the expertise that we have here. So it's really good to know that that made such a difference on the project. So switching gears just a little bit, let's think about, the actual go live experience. What was that like for each one of you? And is there anything that you wish you would have known beforehand? And Joel, we can start with you.
Yeah, so this last implementation that I did actually went very, very smooth. So we were fortunate enough that we had plenty of runway to run through all of the our entire technology stack to make sure that we had everything lined up for go live. So it was actually very, very smooth. And then again, like one of the key things that was really a key differentiator was the change management component of the go live process.
Awesome. All right. And George, how about you? What was the go live experience like for Archway Communities?
Yeah, I'll echo what Joel said. This was the smoothest, and it seems like they continue to get smoother and smoother. I think this is a matter of everyone refining their skills, but it was very smooth. I think we had a number of employees that were nervous about the implementation, about the go live experience, and their fears ended up being somewhat unfounded. It was very smooth.
Perfect. Yeah, I like to think personally that we've almost got it down to a science at this point, but like you said, there is a little bit of an art to it, and I think that's the perfect natural transition into our next question. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes digging into the change management piece, and I know you both had, of course, the highest level of change management that Worsta offers on a project like this, but I think we've both talked already. You've each had some custom training options and packages as well. So George, you mentioned previously your team had an extra set of hours that were devoted to white glove training. And Joel, I don't know if you've mentioned this so far, but your organization also did a SharePoint migration, and as part of that, we delivered some Google Sites training. So can each of you kind of walk us through some of the benefits of having those change management services and really even just having them specifically tailored for your team? And George, let's start with you this time.
Sure. The one-on-one training sessions, white glove treatment, whatever you want to call it. I think when I say that, our founder and chairman, who's in his late 80s, was moving to Google for the first time. It was well worth a small investment to have someone work with him one-on-one to make sure he was up to speed on what needed to be done there. And a bunch of other folks within the organization who, maybe had a personal Gmail account, but really hasn't used the product in a work environment. It was very valuable for them to be able to directly ask questions and have them answered one-on-one. So that was definitely well worth the additional investment.
Perfect. That's good to hear. Yeah, I know that using it from a business perspective, even so many of those features are so different from how I was using it personally. So it's good to hear. I was actually the one who was in a lot of those one-on-one sessions. So it's good to hear that that made such a difference. All right. And then Joel, how about you? Can you tell us about the benefits of having those change management services tailored for your team?
Sure. So, I think it was, just to, echo again what George reiterated, or what George said, is that, there is a great benefit to having kind of those one-on-one sessions. Now, in this past migration, we didn't really have that, because we are a SaaS company. Mostly everybody has used Google products and services, especially in a business setting. So, but we still provided those trainings, because what I wanted to do is really kind of build out our onboarding and internal training process built around the change management that we purchased from the Worsta team. And from then on, I've kind of done the same thing at other organizations, and that has been met with great success, especially new employees starting that have maybe never used a Google product. They were able to, we were able to streamline our onboarding process and provide that training from day one, so that they can get up to speed and feel comfortable with the platform.
Absolutely, yeah. And then just to build on what Joel was just saying, for everybody who might not be familiar with all of Wursta's offerings, we do record all of our training sessions, so they're available for you to use and reuse throughout the future as you're onboarding new people. And we even can offer custom, one-on-one, sit-down, live sessions for new hires that are being onboarded onto the team as well. So whatever really works best for your situation, we have a solution for you. So, all right, switching gears just a little bit and thinking back prior to making the switch. So was there any resistance? Were there people hesitant to make the transition over to Google Workspace? And maybe can you tell us a few of the things that you've heard from people prior to making the switch and how you dealt with that? So let's start with Joel this time.
Sure. So with this last implementation, there was absolutely no resistance at all. I think everybody was very excited to just move over to Google. So, that was a big plus. But I think some of the key things that people raised some concerns about were probably around some of our SharePoint migration and just what that data is going to look like, how that's going to look over into the Google ecosystem versus being on SharePoint. But I think we had great success with migrating that information over, and we didn't skip a beat in that sense.
That's great to hear. And how about you, George? Was there any specific resistance from any employees or leadership, and how did you help to deal with that?
Yeah, no real resistance to the choice to go to Google. The only consternation we had was that I've implemented so much change over the course of the last year that literally all of the systems are different from what they were a year ago. That they're fatigued with the changes. But other than that, no, everyone was very much behind the move to Google specifically. Just a little bit change fatigued.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can completely understand that change fatigue. I think that that's something that probably a lot of us are facing now. But I like to think that at least with the unification of Google's tool set and how easy it is to switch between things and how well integrated that they are, that can help to relieve a little bit of that feeling after the fact. So that's good to hear. So kind of speaking on that or thinking to that, I'd like to ask everyone here, what have you heard from your employees if they don't want to make the switch or you're still having to sell the transition? What are you hearing? Why don't they want to? What points of resistance are you encountering? You can feel free to type it into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And then I think, Emily, do you have a poll for that one as well? Perfect. So it looks like Emily has some top line items that we can look at here. So feel free to choose what works best for you. If you don't see what you're hearing in your organization on that poll, feel free to type it in. All right, so as you've mentioned, I know that there's a lot of reasons that both of you have gone with Google previously, but personal preference, a lot of past usage of the tools, it just being the right choice for your current organization. And I know that you've mentioned some benefits already, such as the increased collaboration, of course. But can you speak a little bit to those benefits and maybe give some specific examples of what you've seen? And Joel, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I think what we've seen is from a collaboration perspective, we're able, it feels like we're able to get more done, right? Versus having to have these constant, potential video meetings or sending files back and forth and somebody not having the right, or updated file, right? So that's probably the biggest benefit, for us, and just, being able to find all of our data, right? Just by using Google's, cloud search function within Google Drive to be able to find all of the documentation and everything that we need. And I think one of the other benefits that we're starting to see now heavily, even today, is going to be our increase in security, right? So we are utilizing Google for single sign-on. So we've actually tied it in, integrated with all of our other SaaS applications to be able to establish single sign-on. And we've really streamlined our onboarding and offboarding process and just ensure that all of our other platforms are secure, and that appropriate access is being set up.
Great. I see, Michael, that you've raised a hand. Really quick before we keep going, Michael, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a question for Joel. You mentioned that you implemented single sign-on. Did you use Google's single sign-on, or did you use a different product for
Google single sign-on? So we've tied everything using mostly the SAML or some of Google's already pre-configured applications and tied it to our SaaS products. But because we're also on Google Enterprise, we also have secure LDAP functionality. So we've actually tied it to some, quote unquote, legacy applications that we have running in on a server in the cloud. So we were able to tie those in through secure LDAP as well for authentication to those applications.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks for your question, Michael. Sidebar, everyone, we'll have more time for Q&A after the session as well. Feel free to type in any questions or raise a hand just like you saw, and we'll be able to address it. But for now, George, same question. What specific benefits have you seen so far in using Google Workspace?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, improved collaboration. Longer answer for us, and I think it's probably true of most companies, is, our employees are working more remotely now than they ever have in the past, and they move between devices more often. With Google, that is as seamless as it could possibly be. A constantly changing remote organization, the Google platform is just, perfect for that type of environment. It's not that we didn't have, some similar capabilities in the past. They're just not as light, as easy to use, as intuitive. It's just increased collaboration immensely.
Perfect, great. Yeah, I know internally at Wursta, I don't think we'd get half as much done as we do without Google either. So it's good to hear that you guys are seeing that. All right, so earlier, I heard one of you, I think it was Joel, mention, how much has changed with Google products in the last, few years. I'm curious what differences each of you have noticed in the tools over the last few years. And then maybe just to kind of expand on that a little bit, I'd also love to hear what's your favorite recent update. So let's go ahead and start with George this time.
Sure. So, I kind of think of the Google, the inbox, the Google Mail as kind of the interface, the desktop, right? And the collaboration of chat and meets within just the Chrome interface is for me it continues to get better. It's much more sleek and easy to use now than it was with the Hangouts and interface, previous interface. So I think that improvement for me is probably number one. But there, every I don't know. I keep finding other things that I didn't know that are available and useful. So it changes all the time.
I know it really does. Joel, how about yourself? Do you have a favorite feature or update or some changes that you've noticed recently?
I think the one that stands out to the most for me now at this point is probably calendar. Surprisingly, there's been a lot of like cool features coming out for calendar, and literally just saw this morning that there was a new update to calendar that I was actually looking for, which is focus time, being able to book time on your calendar to be able to just stay knee deep and focus on the work versus having to juggle a bunch of meetings. So for me, that's pretty important to be able to put that on my calendar and just to let people know that I'm kind of focusing on something and that they can reach me any other time outside of that. So I thought that was a pretty cool feature there. And then I think the other one that was just recently rolled out was basically automatically creating meeting notes, or not meeting notes, but creating a document for meeting notes. I thought that was a pretty cool tool because I tend to forget to do that sometimes for my meeting. So that was very easy for me to just go ahead, create the document when I create the meeting invite, and everybody can kind of jump into that document and start taking notes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's one of my favorite features too. Okay, I'll add to this. I have a favorite new feature that's been kind of rolled out over the last, I would say, year. Something that previously was like a Google developer option, but tab grouping. If you're not on tab grouping inside of Chrome, you've got to get on that. So just wanted to share that real quick. All right, so I know the last couple of years now, there's been so many changes really just to the way that people work. And I'm curious, how has Google Workspace impacted your team's ability to work, either remotely or in a hybrid environment? You could tell us a little bit about, what your business's, in person versus remote model looks like right now, and then tell us a little bit about Google Workspace and how it's helped that situation. We'll start with Joel.
Yeah. So I think what George had mentioned previously, like the increase obviously in collaboration, but also just the ease of transition between multiple devices, right? Going from your tablet to your laptop to your phone. It's just a very smooth and easy transition, and the interfaces are very much similar. So I guess that obviously helps with that ease of transition. And I think it allows the team to become, I guess, more available in that sense, but also be able to take that time off too, right? And really being able to kind of share out their calendar information just to let folks know that they're available or not available, right? That feature has since come to chat, and I think other tools as well, right? When you're out of the office, it's kind of giving you a red alert before you got to do anything that person is out of office. So that really helps us out, especially when trying to schedule meetings or trying to run through some potential issues that we might have, that we've got to grab the whole team. We'll know who's available and and be able to start working on some of those issues immediately.
Right, absolutely. And George, how about yourself? What type of environment is your team working in right now, and how has Google Workspace helped with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to make the presumption that everyone on the call has, a coworker that has been diagnosed with COVID over the last 18 months or so, right? So multiple times we have had employees that, go home for the weekend, Monday, not feeling well, going to go get a COVID test, going to work remotely for the rest of the week until I get my test results back. And now they don't have their work computer with them. So they still want to work, and they can just jump on their home PC or laptop or whatever, mobile device, and get done just about everything they need to get done, using that device, that other device that's not, quote unquote, set up for work, right? Without any interruption at all. They just go and log in using their business credentials, and away they go. That has played out multiple times, as I mentioned. Over and above that, we are allowing remote work to the extent possible for an organization of our type. So, the employees have really enjoyed being able to do that, saying, I can't take my kid to school because of, potential COVID infection or something like that. So I need to work from home, and they can just start working using their personal device and no issues whatsoever.
Great. Yeah, it's good to hear that the flexibility that Google provides with its products has been able to help out, especially in these tough times, I think. So that's so good to hear. Now, kind of pivoting or playing right off of that, I'd like to hear from the audience. So is your organization still working remotely? Are you working in a hybrid environment? Tell us about it. We'd love to hear that, so we can kind of consider that going forward. All right, so I know we're getting down kind of towards the end of our session here today. I have just a couple more questions for you guys. So first, how has your perception of Google Workspace changed through this process, and maybe even just over the years? I'd love to hear just how has that perception changed, and we can start with George this time.
Yeah, sure. So, back in 2011 when I did my first migration, it was a bit of a risk, right? It was not it was not the go-to solution by any means, at that point. But the product set, the smoothness, the smoothness of implementation transition has improved over the years, and it just keeps getting better. And it hasn't been very long between the last implementation and this most current one, but there have been substantial improvements in that short period of time. It just keeps being improved and gets better and better. It seems like there's no end in sight for that.
Absolutely. And Joel, how about yourself? How has your perception of Google Workspace changed over the years?
It's basically the same as what George said, right? The product is continuing to improve. Every day there's new features, new functionality coming out. And I think at this point, I don't think I can't go back to anything else now at this point, unfortunately. So I think a lot of folks are like that. I hear that from a lot of our employees that, once we transitioned over to Google, they can't go back to Microsoft or anything else. So yeah.
I know I personally feel that way. It's difficult to even think about other products at this point. So it's good to hear that I'm not alone in that thought. All right, so last question. This one's a two-parter. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's considering making this transition? And then is it best to do so with a partner like Wursta? And so we can start with Joel this time.
Sure. So I think the advice that I would give is definitely work with a partner, right? Because if you've never done any of these implementations before, like you don't know what you don't know, and a partner will most likely have run into similar issues or a similar platform and know exactly what needs to happen in order to have a smooth migration. And then the other key component there is going to be, especially if you're coming from, a Microsoft shop or even Lotus Notes or something, right? A really, really legacy system, like definitely invest in the change management, because that is going to go a very long way. Like the resistance from end users or other employees, moving to Google or our new product is usually around the fear that they're not going to be as productive on the new system, right? And that's mostly because they haven't worked with it. They're worried about being fully trained up while having to continue to do their day-to-day work. And definitely investing in change management will ease that and just make the transition much smoother.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joel. I know that I personally feel that way. It's like our trainings can really take someone from getting through their day to kind of like a power user, and it happens very, very quickly. So I think there's a ton of ROI on that. So George, how about yourself? What's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who's considering making this transition? And then how do you feel about doing it with a partner?
I think, the change management, yes, without a doubt, I'll reiterate that. And in order to, add something to the conversation, I'll simply say, if possible, find some champions out there in your organization to to champion the cause, if you will, and socialize it with the group. And as far as a partner, yeah, I mean, I honestly wouldn't even consider doing it without a partner. And again, I've done it 5 times now, and I'm capable of doing most of the work if I need to myself, and I'm sure Joel is as well. But I wouldn't dream to do it without a partner that does it every day.
Absolutely. Perfect. That's so great to hear. I know Wursta is really so proud of our working history together. We've been so excited to have an opportunity to work with you guys again. So I'm so glad that we were able to help you with this transition. So with that, I know we're getting close to time. I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, but I have just a couple of other slides. So why Google Workspace? Of course, it's more than just the popular communication and productivity apps that you know and love. I mean, everyone knows Gmail, Calendar, Drive, but it's also going to include everything that you need from a business perspective. So the ability to have productive, high fidelity meetings with Google Meet, just like we're doing right now, enterprise grade telephony solutions with Google Voice. I know Joel mentioned the power of Google's cloud search being built right into everything. And then of course, having everything you need to manage your users and keep them secure with Google's admin tools. So with secure, intuitive apps, they were built, for the cloud, from the very beginning. Google Workspace is the future. It's helping people to reimagine and redefine work. And of course, Wursta is here to help in implementing that solution. All right, so this is just a short list of how Wursta can help, but we do offer a variety of services and options to tailor your Google Workspace migration and change management experience exactly to your needs. So from taking care of the migration and the change management itself to offering a la carte and custom training solutions, communications, anything like that, those can all be custom tailored specifically to your organization and the needs of your team. So we're really there to take care of you throughout the entire process. From a sales side, your Worsta rep will be reaching out to schedule a quick call to go over the details of today's session and also to just kind of debrief together. But before we wrap up, I did want to take a moment to dive into the last point on the screen here and just show what a typical project timeline would look like. So of course, every single Google Workspace migration is going to be different, but I think that this slide gives a really great high-level overview of what a typical migration timeline looks like. I'm sure, probably a lot of people out there don't know how quickly we can actually get this done. So every single project begins with this planning phase where we do all of our technical discovery and really lay out a firm plan for how this project will proceed. During that time, we'll identify any nuances specific to your organization. We'll also come up with a game plan to tackle them. We'll also work together to create our change management plan so that your entire team is prepared for the transition. Now, during this second phase, that's the migration phase, we will migrate all of your historical items. So whether it's emails, whether you're doing a file storage migration, we're going to make sure that everything is ready for your end users on day one when you go live with Google. So the go live period itself is usually around 1 week, but this can be custom tailored to your organization based on the size, the training needs, the support needs. And then our technical team also uses this time to resolve any issues related to the migration. Now, finally, this last phase, this final day, that's the transition to support. So one of the beautiful things about working with Wursta is that our partnership really doesn't end when the migration is over. We are always there to help support you should any issues arise in the future. And with that, we are going to get into questions. I'd love to have your feedback first. There's going to be a link in the chat and you'll receive a follow-up email with a short survey to tell us what you thought of today's discussion.